father singing with attempts.
For once in my life.
For once in my life.
Once in my life. That's one of my all-time favorites. That's my fault.
You knew about the 5 children that Paul Williams had, but what if I told you he had a 6th secret son whose identity he revealed just before his death?
And I saw them again November 11th of '67 when I was a freshman at Ohio University. Your father and the other temps were in the locker room, and a buddy of mine and I, we snuck into the locker room. That was their dressing room. We talked to them.
In 2011, Kenneth Williams, the son of Paul Williams, a founding member of the Temptations, was sentenced to prison for the M of his great-aunt in 1989. This tragic event occurred in the same year that his father was honored with induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Have love, oh baby, oh baby. If you just put your hand in mine, we're gonna leave.
Before entering prison, Kenneth entrusted his sister, Paula Williams, with his share of royalty checks inherited from their father, who was renowned for his role in the iconic Motown group. However, upon his release from prison after more than 2 decades, Kenneth discovered that the money, amounting to over $200,000, was missing. He alleged that his sister had spent the funds, leading to a legal dispute filed in federal court in Detroit.
He said, "Come on, Otis is right. We can't strike against Motown." He said, all Barry would do is look around the corner and say, "Oh, the Temptations are not recording? Good."
This incident adds another sorrowful chapter to the tumultuous history of the Williams family, marked by the legacy of Paul Williams and the ongoing struggles over Motown royalties. The Temptations' success has generated significant income from royalties, which are distributed among Paul Williams' heirs, including Kenneth and Paula, amounting to approximately $80,000 annually. However, disputes over these royalties are not unique to the Williams family, reflecting broader tensions within the music industry. Paul Williams Jr., Paul Williams' son, reflects on the complexities of wealth, expressing uncertainty about whether the royalties are a blessing or a burden. The Williams family has been embroiled in legal battles over Motown royalties since Paul Williams' untimely death in 1973, leaving behind a legacy marked by success and tragedy within the music industry. In 1987, 14 years after Paul Williams passed away, his family decided to reopen his estate to pursue royalties owed by Motown and establish the rightful heirs. This was a complex task because Paul had died without leaving a will. The Williams family accused Motown of withholding royalties following Paul's death, claiming they were owed $195,000. However, Motown argued that the family couldn't claim royalties older than 6 years. After negotiations, the family reached a settlement in March 1988 for $96,520, covering royalties from 1981 through June 1987. Subsequently, Wayne County probate judge Joseph Pernick was tasked with dividing the royalties and determining the rightful shares and heirs. Paul Williams had 3 daughters and 2 sons, Sarita, Paula, Mary, Kenneth, and Paul Jr., with his wife Mary Agnes. Before his death, Paul acknowledged fathering a 6th child, Paul Williams Lucas. As the royalties were about to be divided, a 7th child emerged, a son born in 1968 to one of Paul Williams' girlfriends named Derek Vineyard. Derek, who was only 5 when Paul passed away, sought a share of the Motown royalties. Paula Williams disputed Derek's status as an heir, but Paul's brother Johnny Williams contradicted her. According to a 1988 deposition transcript, Johnny claimed that Paul never denied being Derek's father. He recalled seeing Paul with Derek's mother on dates at the Fox Theater and the 20 Grand nightclub. Additionally, there were rumors that Paul Williams had fathered twins in Cleveland, leading Johnny to comment on his brother's proclivity for fathering children. The judge determined that Derek Vineyard was indeed an heir and proceeded to divide the late Motown star's past and future royalties accordingly. Paul Williams' widow would receive 1/3 of the royalties, while the remaining 7 children would split the rest equally. In January 1989, the family agreed that Paula would distribute the royalty checks to her 4 siblings and mother twice a year. However, the 2 half-siblings received their shares directly from the record company. Kenneth Williams, however, didn't have much time to enjoy his share of the royalties. On July 18, 1989, he committed a serious crime, Kay his 81-year-old great-aunt, Mary Bryant, in her Detroit home. This act led to his conviction of second-degree M and a sentence of 15 to 30 years in prison. Kenneth attributes his incarceration to addiction, acknowledging that prison ultimately saved his life. Before his father's death, Kenneth enjoyed a privileged lifestyle, accompanying his father and the group on various tours across the country. However, after Paul's passing, Kenneth's behavior took a downward spiral, leading to his involvement with and eventually his criminal act. Upon his release from prison after serving over 20 years, Kenneth discovered that the money he had entrusted to his sister Paula was gone. He filed a lawsuit against her and Motown's successor, Universal Music Group, alleging various charges including breach of contract and fraud. Despite the legal battles, Kenneth remains hopeful and refuses to harbor bitterness or anger towards his sister. He acknowledges the challenges of trusting others, given his past experiences, but remains willing to support his sister if she needs him, despite the complexities of their relationship. Paul Williams grew up in the Ensley neighborhood of Birmingham, Alabama. His parents were Sophia and Rufus Williams, who was part of a gospel music group called the Ensley Jubilee Singers. Paul met Eddie Kendricks when they were in elementary school. Legend has it, their friendship began with a fist fight after Paul accidentally spilled mop water on Eddie. Despite the rocky start, they bonded over their shared passion for singing and joined the church choir together. As teenagers, Paul, Eddie, along with Kel Osborne and Willie Waller, formed a singing group called the Cavaliers. They dreamed of making it big in the music industry. In 1957, Paul, Eddie, and Kel left Birmingham for Cleveland, Ohio, leaving Willie behind. They renamed themselves the Primes and found a manager named Milton Jenkins, who took them to Detroit, Michigan. Although they never recorded as the Primes, they were successful performers. They even inspired a female group spin-off called the Primettes, who later became the Supremes. In 1961, Kel Osborne moved to California, and the Primes broke up. Eddie returned to Alabama but visited Paul in Detroit. During his visit, they learned that Otis Williams, who led another Detroit group called The Distance, had openings in his lineup. Paul and Eddie joined Otis, along with Melvin Franklin and Elbridge Bryant, forming a new group initially named the Elgins, which later became the legendary Temptations after signing with the local Motown label in 1961. After securing a record deal, Paul Williams and his bandmates faced disappointment with several unsuccessful singles before finally achieving success in 1964 with The Way You Do the Things You Do, which made it to the Billboard Top 20. Following this breakthrough, they churned out more hits like My Girl, Ain't Too Proud to Beg, and I Know I'm Losing You. Despite being the original lead singer when the group started by 1965, Paul's role was overshadowed by David Ruffin and Eddie Kendricks, who took the lead on many of the Temptations' hit singles. This left Paul feeling sidelined, even on album tracks and B-sides, leading him to voice his frustration by saying, "I can sing too." In response, he was given the lead vocals on the song Don't Look Back in 1965. Paul sang lead on numerous Temptations songs and was the main lead singer in the early years. Some of his early leads include Your Wonderful Love, 1961, Slow Down Heart, 1962, I Want a Love I Can See, 1963, and Oh, Mother of Mine, 1961, as well as Farewell My Love, 1963, shared with Eddie Kendricks. Known as the Temptations' top dancer, Paul was the group's original choreographer, creating routines for his group and the Supremes, notably their iconic Stop in the Name of Love routine, until Charlie Atkins took over that role for all of Motown's acts. Paul's later lead performances on Temptations songs include Just Another Lonely Night, 1965, No More Water in the Well, 1967, and a cover version of Hey Girl, 1969. Paul also sang lead alongside Dennis Edwards, who joined the group in 1968 on Motown's first Grammy Award-winning track, Cloud 9. One of his most memorable lead performances was his rendition of For Once in My Life during the television special TCB, originally aired on December 9, 1968 on NBC. His live version of Don't Look Back is also often praised as one of his standout performances. Additionally, he took over the lead vocal for live performances of My Girl after David Ruffin left the group. Williams struggled with sickle cell anemia, a condition that frequently affected his health. In 1965, he began a relationship with Winnie Brown, who was the hairstylist for the Supremes and related to Supremes member Florence Ballard. Despite his love for Brown, he remained devoted to his wife and kids. However, he also felt down because Charlie Atkins had taken over his role as choreographer, leaving him feeling somewhat redundant. Life on the road led to Williams developing a stark change from his previous habit of only drinking milk. Otis Williams remembered, "So to see a guy come from drinking milk to drinking, sometimes 2 to 3/5 of Courvoisier a day, that was kind of hard to take." In the spring of 1969, Williams and Brown opened a celebrity fashion boutique called Celebrity House West in downtown Detroit. Unfortunately, the business didn't go as planned, and Williams ended up owing over $80,000 in taxes. His health deteriorated, sometimes preventing him from performing due to exhaustion and pain, which he tried to cope with by drinking heavily. The other members of the Temptations tried to help, from intervening with his alcohol intake to keeping oxygen tanks backstage. Despite their efforts, Williams' health and performances continued to decline, and he refused to see a doctor. Due to his health issues and voice being affected by illness, and the Temptations brought in Richard Street, the lead singer of another Motown group, the Monitors, to fill in for Williams during performances. Street would sing Williams' parts from backstage, except for special numbers like "Don't Look Back" and "For Once in My Life." When Williams couldn't perform, Street took his place on stage. Finally, in April 1971, Williams agreed to see a doctor, who discovered a spot on his liver and advised him to retire from the group. Williams left, and Street became his permanent replacement. To support him, the group continued to pay Williams his share of royalties and kept him on the payroll as an advisor and choreographer for 2 more years. On August 17, 1973, Paul Williams was discovered dead inside a car parked in an alley, shortly after leaving his then-girlfriend's new house following an argument. A gun was found near him, and his death was determined to be a likely. According to Otis Williams, Paul had mentioned feeling to him and Melvin Franklin several months before his death. Paul's funeral took place on August 24, 1973, attended by his family and former bandmates. He left behind his wife, Mary Agnes Williams, and 5 children: Sarita, Kenneth, Paula, Mary, and Paul Jr. Paul Jr. later joined a Temptations spin-off group called The Temptations Revue featuring Dennis Edwards. Additionally, Paul had 3 other children: Paul Williams Lucas, Anthony Johnson, and Derek Vineyard, with 3 different girlfriends. He was laid to rest at Lincoln Memorial Park Cemetery in Michigan. The circumstances surrounding Paul's death raised suspicions among his family, suggesting the possibility of foul play. The coroner noted that Paul, who was right-handed, had been shot on the left side of his head. Furthermore, a bottle of was found near his left side, suggesting it may have been dropped while he was shot. The gun used had fired 2 shots, only one of which proved fatal. Despite his tragic end, Paul Williams was honored posthumously for his contributions to music. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1989, the Vocal Group Hall of Fame in 1999, and the Rhythm and Blues Music Hall of Fame in 2013. His solo recordings were later released by Motown on Temptations-related compilations in the 1980s and 1990s. In 1998, NBC aired The Temptations, a television miniseries based on an autobiographical book by Otis Williams, where Paul was portrayed by actor Christian Payton. Additionally, the music video for Diana Ross's song Missing You pays tribute to Paul Williams, along with other deceased Motown artists like Marvin Gaye, Florence Ballard, and Tammy Terrell. That's all for the video, folks. Thanks for watching.